Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the regular afternoon council meeting of Monday, May the 9th. This meeting is being recorded live and is streaming on the District of Summerland YouTube channel, youtube.com, District of Summerland. All representations to council, written or verbal, I'm out of breath, will form part of the public record and be available to the public for viewing electronically or as a written record. Members of the public may access the meeting or participate in the following ways. Attend council chambers in person. Please register in advance by contacting the corporate officer at corporateofficer@summerland.ca to ensure there is enough room in the council chambers. As I mentioned, you can watch the meeting live or recorded at the District of Summerland YouTube channel. You can also register in advance to speak during the meeting. Under comment opportunities, items 6 and 9, again, please register in advance by contacting the corporate officer at corporateofficer@summerland.ca with your name, civic address, and how you will be participating, whether in person, by telephone, or Zoom. Corporate officer will provide you with further details when you register. The fourth way is to request to speak during the meeting. If you have not registered in advance but wish to speak during the public comment opportunities, there will be time given if there is time permitting. After I've provided everyone who has pre-registered with an opportunity to comment, the floor will be open to those in council chambers and those on the conference line. Conference line can be accessed by dialing 778-907-2071 and entering meeting ID 506-489-9374 and passcode 485186. Kendra, are there any late items to introduce? No. Okay, so I'll call for approval of the agenda as presented. Councillors Van Elfen and Holmes, all in favor? Thank you. And adoption of the regular afternoon council meeting minutes of April the 25th, and also the committee of the whole meeting minutes of April the 25th. Councillor Van Elfen and Councillor Holmes, all in favor? Thank you. No delegations today. Is there anybody wanting to speak to us before we get into the meeting? Okay, thank you. So we'll go on to the first business item. 7.1 is a quarterly update from our fire and protective services. And I'll ask, I'm not sure who's going first. I'll go first. Yeah, Chief Rob Robinson is coming to the, oh, that's the RCMP one. There we go. Thank you. Please go ahead when you're ready.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Good afternoon, councillors. Madam Mayor, thank you. To start off our first slide, we see our incidents. So we are 5 more than last year. We have 19 for January, 23 for February, and 29 for March. So in total, 71. We are about 12 more than the year before as well, too. Training, thank goodness. We've gone to regular training. Our January was a little, we didn't do as much training in January because of COVID. We have 16 sessions there, 21 for February and 31 for March. Things were getting back to normal in March because we've had 3 training events outside the Summerland Fire Department, where we had a total of 12 members attend 3 different sessions. We did a Fire Service Instructor 1, where fire department members can learn how to teach other fire department members. We had 2 members attend a Incident Safety Officer course, which allows our members to be safety officers on fire scenes, car accidents, and all the other incidents that we do. We also had 8 members attend the Penticton Wildfire and Urban Interface Symposium. That was just a couple weeks ago. We had Also in Deer Ridge area, we had members attend there as well too as part of the urban interface. So we included the lower Deer Ridge for some of the training there and also throughout Penticton. So you see the numbers are pretty consistent with pre-COVID numbers except for January. Open burning, so our next slide is our open burning and days of burning. Again, they're pretty consistent with previous years with not too many burning days in January, a few more in February and more in March when our winds get a little better and our venting gets a little better for that, which is good. Our next slide is our inspections. So in January, we had 68, February 46, March 50 for a total of 164. And again, that's better numbers than our COVID numbers. So we're going back to consistent numbers before for COVID so we can get our guys out there and do inspections. Our next slide is public education. Again, with hopefully COVID gone, we can get back to more inspections in our businesses and, public education events. We had 3 in February and 4 in March for a total of 7. January, February, March are our slower years for public education events. Pretty consistent with pre-COVID numbers. Also, just to give you a quick update from the fire department for last little while, we've had some members retire, resign, and then we did a hiring yesterday with 4. We've had 2 members join in November, 1 in November, 1 in January, and then we put it out to a bunch of people and we have 4 more that participated in a little exam we had yesterday and a physical where we climbed some ladders, did some backed out mass stuff, climbed a hose tower, dragged a dummy, that kind of stuff. So we had all 6 of them do that. So we had 5 kind of retire, resign in the last 6 months, so to speak. So we've brought 6 more on. So just to give you an update on that as well too. And that's all I have. Any questions?
Councillor Carlson and then Van Elfen and then Barkwell.
Thank you. The other day I was with my son, he's 2, and we saw them going up the ladder and testing it out. And it got me thinking if we had ever done any public event or something for children to give them some fire safety, but also let them see some fire trucks. I know schools have done that, but I know COVID probably changed that. The littlest kids are the ones that seem to love them the most, and I just wonder if that's something that's ever been done here.
So our doors are always open. So weekends or after school, I encourage anybody to stop by the fire hall and we can always give a tour of anything that they're interested in. We quite often do it all the time. So we do that, yes. I don't generally get them to climb ladders, but we will show them all the time. And every Tuesday, if you want to set outside the fire department between, it's pretty early, 8 o'clock and 9, we generally set up the big ladder and do our testing on Tuesdays.
Councillor Van Elfen.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. In your fire update, says fire dollar loss, year to date 5. What's a dollar loss?
Thank you, Councillor, through the mayor. So the fire dollar loss is a fire that's happened every fire is a dollar loss technically, but it's one of those ones where it might be part of the structure. So we had a few structure fires, that's a dollar loss fire. We had one that was electrical fire, so we called that a dollar loss fire as well too. Does that kind of make sense? Yeah. So that's what those are.
If I could continue on, Madam Mayor. The other question I have, I've got a call on a Sunday, open burning. They tried the fire hall, they tried bylaw, and they phoned me like, where do I go from here? And is there a certain number that they can reach on a Sunday to report somebody illegally burning?
So we don't have admin staff at the fire department. That phone is not generally, it's checked kind of every hour kind of thing. What I encourage people to do is phone 911. That's the best number to get a hold of us.
Okay.
And it's kind of like a non-emergency, but it is kind of emergency. If they're burning, they shouldn't be. Yeah. Then it is an emergency. So I encourage everyone to phone 911.
Okay. Thank you so much.
Did they leave a message? or?
I don't know.
Okay, because I tell the guys, we always phone people back. Okay.
Councillor Barkwell.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Just looking at your education, public education sheet there, it has 2 people for juvenile fire starters. That's probably not what it sounds like. What is that?
No, thank you, Councillor, through the mayor. I had a family phone me up and wanted to just have a talking to their kids. So they were, I guess they had maybe lit something on fire and they just wanted a fire personnel in uniform to show up. And so we just chatted to them and gave them the consequences of what can happen if fires start. And so that's what we did.
Okay, thank you. And then you, some staff attended the urban interface training. Anything particularly an interest or note that came out of that? It's a big issue these days.
Yes, I think so. Four of our new members attended Boots on the Ground. It's kind of we do an introductory course here in Summerland for forest fires, but this is another where someone else can come in and teach people. I think that's a really good course. We try to encourage. We only have so many members, so we can only send so many people to it. I think anybody that can attend any one of those, there's probably 6 or 7, maybe 8 sessions that they can take in different categories. So we had Boots on the Ground, and 2 members attended the dangerous tree fault, like so they understand what dangerous trees are and fire behavior for a wildfire. And then we also did the Deer Ridge, where myself drove the water, or had another person, we drove the water tender and we filled up other vehicles in between houses, and we did that kind of stuff as well too. So there's actually, the whole thing is awesome for our community here.
Yeah, for our community. And one more question, if I could. Don't we normally get a report on response times as sort of a critical measure of the fire department?
I can do that next time. Sorry, I was unaware of that.
Okay. I mean, that is something you guys monitor closely and is important for insurance and all these other things. I'm not quite sure all the implications, but.
I might have it here, actually. I wonder if I brought it with me.
And the trend, right?
Right. So I do have, response times, getting a little older, I just turned 36, so I'm going to put these on. So we had, actually, because of our one hire this year in May, our response time has actually gone down a little bit for our first truck out. So normally our first truck out, like this is in 2021, our response time first truck out was 6 minutes and 32 seconds. In 2020, our response time was 7 minutes and 23 seconds. So it's almost a 45 difference in time. And then our duty officer trucks. So would you like a report on that for my next one? And I can give you all that information, and then I'm not trying to find it all through my sheet here.
I think that's, what we've had in the past. It's kind of interesting to see where we stand. And
yeah, I think the biggest one that I had pointed out was with the one new person. I think during our daytime responses was a little quicker, which is good. But I can put that on a report for my second quarter.
Is that good? I have one question for you, Chief Robinson. You reported on the, sorry, I just have to find it again. On the dollar loss, yes, fire dollar loss. Do you also report on injuries or loss of life in your reports?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Through our council here, or so what we do is we actually do up every report of every fire through the Office of the Fire Commissioner. They're the governing body of us that we send information to, and they do stats on. So we do that, yes, through the Office of the Fire Commissioner.
But it's not part of this report?
No, but I can do it if you'd like. So it's not part of this actual one. What fire departments generally do is they sometimes will do it at the end of the year. But I can do one quarterly if you'd like.
Council, end of year? End of year would be nice, thank you.
Okay, yeah.
So the fourth quarter.
Yeah.
Any other questions? Councillor Van Elfen.
Just one more quick question. Have you had the opportunity to see a video that was produced, I believe, with the Cattlemen's Association and our local PIB on interface selective grazing practices? That is, if you get a chance to go out Garnet Valley, right now above the rifle range, you'll see a prime example of miles of electric fence that has been set up to keep cattle in the selective grazing areas, plus solar powered pumps to keep the cattle out of riparian areas and pumping into a water trough. Reason I mention this is that the selective grazing around interface areas with forestry, they're finding that when they leave the cattle in there for a certain length of time and then move them into higher elevations, that it helps with interface fire. Have you seen the video? And if you have, is there a possibility that we could see it here at council? I think it's really interesting.
I did see the video. Someone did send it to me, and it is very interesting. I didn't have time to join the webinar that day. I think it is a good idea. I haven't really studied it that well, but it is a great idea. It's a great new concept that's happening, and I think it's a good idea. But I guess I could phone the gal that phoned me from, I think it might have been BC Wildfire, or maybe it was the Cattlemen Association that had sent me an email, so I could look into it further.
Yeah, I just found it really interesting, especially with the indigenous aspect also of the history of every Indian band had a fire person, and their sole job was to burn off sections of forests and to encourage the deer and elk to come and forage in those areas so they could harvest their animals. But they found that doing so, when wildfires did hit, there wasn't that underbrush and stuff. So it was really interesting. I thought maybe the rest of council wouldn't mind seeing it once upon a time
Sure,
in the
I can
future.
look into it for sure.
Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you, Councillor.
A farmer that you know is in the trailer of that, Keith Manders. Yes. They're doing that exact thing up at Garnet Valley Ranch, which is the property that Steve Lorney and Chris Coletta have. And I'm farming up there right now, and we see the cows regularly. It's pretty neat to see them.
I think it's a good idea.
Yeah,
yes,
it's a really good idea.
Yeah.
Dave Zender of Farmland Advantage is another person that can send you the video. But anyways, that's a really good thing to bring up because, you know, we know how close the fire got to that property a couple of years, well, I guess 5 years ago now. Yeah. So yeah, it's a really good practice. Okay, any other questions for our fire chief? All right, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Sergeant Preston.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Thank you, Madam Mayor and councillors, for having me today. I will. I just turned 35, so I will put these things on. The quarter one results, statistic-wise for us, we did have no change in calls for service, which was actually nice to see for a change, as the last few quarters we've experienced an increase in calls for service. So we had 635 calls for service in this quarter. I'm anticipating, because there was, I did talk about before about the increase of calls, in that a lot of it stemmed from, not a lot of it, but some of it stemmed from me being in the position, and then everything was, if we do anything, it's a file. So it's kind of shown an increase, and then now I think maybe it's going to start stabilizing. Now, so we're at that, regular calls for service, and hopefully the changes won't occur that often. But of the 635, we did see a decrease of 27% in violent crime, and property crime, however, we saw a 38% increase. Of the property crime increase of note, auto thefts, we went from 3 in Q1 of 2021 to 10 in Q1 of 2022. And some of with those 3 were attempts, and they actually weren't, the vehicles weren't taken. 2 of them vehicles, the keys were left inside the vehicle, unlocked. 2 of them are what we refer to as a taywalk, so it's take without owner's consent, and that could be a friend or a family member that takes a vehicle without the owner's permission. And then 30% of the theft of vehicles were F-350s. So we do try to get the word out there, especially to F-350 owners, that they should probably maybe put those wheel locks on or something like that to deflect the urge for them to take the 350s. And all the vehicles were recovered. They were recovered in surrounding detachments, Penticton and West Kelowna. Mischief to property, that was another thing. We've had several TELUS cut wires, which was of a huge concern to us. We did do a media release on that because it did affect the landline ability for people to call 911. So we took that very seriously. We do have a suspect that we are investigating at this point. No charges have been laid in that though. But we're also working with TELUS in their security section. Theft other is another one that is that had a big increase, and what's included in those are there's 5 incidents where there was theft of liquor. Now, one individual in particular was residing in Summerland. He's now not, but he has been charged from video surveillance and from the liquor stores. We were able to determine who they were, actually on all 5 cases. And the one individual was responsible for a couple of them, and he's been charged, and he's out awaiting several charges, not only in Summerland, but other jurisdictions as well. The other ones were, they were known to us, and alternative measures were utilized in this case, where they've approached the business owners and agreed on alternative measures. So. Then several other files, like I think 6 of them were very minor, like food. I think one of them was chocolate bar. So it was almost the shoplifting category, but it was scored as theft other. License plate, firewood, a cell phone, a mirror on one file. So, relatively low in cost of loss, but nonetheless still a theft. And that's about it for reporting on the numbers. Traffic incidents, of course, still are our highest calls for service. I wanted to touch on our resourcing. I think last time I touched on our resourcing, we were really hurt. I'm actually very excited to say that we are 8 of 9 members here. 2 retired members have gone through the books, and we've gotten replacements. There's another one retiring in August, and we're also getting a replacement in around that time, a member coming from Gabriel Island. So that'll put us at 9, and we actually still have another member that's working light duties, so that'll actually put us at 10 members. So it's actually very nice to report on that for a change. As far as the budget, I just received information. Our budget as of 2022, March 31st, we were 101% of our budget. And the reason for the overage is the number of overtime expenses that came as a result of being so short-staffed, and then also with the back pay and the retro and all that took place in the budget was of the old rate and not the new rate. So being only 1% above was actually quite impressive, so I was told. And that's all. Any questions?
Does your year end is March 31st, like for budget?
Yes, madam.
Yeah, thank you. Any other question? Oh, Councillor Carlson.
Well, it's just a comment, but it's nice to know that Summerland's bad apples are still sometimes kind of hilarious. I don't know if you've ever seen the old column that used to be in the newspaper about the bad apples, but the police report would always put out the petty crimes like stealing a mirror, like that would become a bad apple, and it was kind of a running joke in Summerland for a long time. So I'm glad that we're still not seeing
Glad that
a
some
lot
things
of
never
of
changed.
serious crime. Yes, so thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Councillor Holmes.
Yeah, we heard about at the RDS last week from Superintendent Hunter but in other areas of theft of copper from industrial areas. I was just wondering, the TELUS wires, were they after the copper in the wires, or is it just mischief or just for the sake of cutting the line?
No, unfortunately, it's not just the copper, and you know, there's some mental health issues that underlining issues that are with that suspect.
Anyone else? All right.
All right.
Thank you. Thanks very much for your update.
Thank you very much.
Okay, on to item 7.2, Water Emergency Response Plan. And we'll start this with a few words from CAO Stat.
Thank you, Your Worship. Today we bring forward our final proposed water emergency response plan to guide future actions if we encounter a heat dome or other challenges. Obviously, we never have the luxury of controlling the timing and nature of an event, but with planning principles and practice, we can respond to an emergency with intent and focus. Importantly, this is a response plan for what our actions will be in a water utility emergency. It's not a water emergency prevention plan. This plan is about what specific steps and actions we take to ensure consistent process and accountability in a response. Preventative measures precede the activation of this plan, such as ongoing communication with stakeholders and the public who rely on the system, instituting community water restrictions where necessary, and of course, strategic investments such as the water line separation and even the current project being an example at Giants Head Road. Strategic efforts and future planning are the subject of our water master plan, with an updated version of that 10-year plan coming to council in June. I am proud of the work staff have done to prepare this document. If council supports the approach, we'll further be engaging key users to talk about next steps and the approach so that we have a high level of readiness for the coming summer season. As we learn through this plan and the use of it, we'll continue to improve the plan and fine-tune our approaches. And with that, I'll turn things over to our Director of Utilities to walk us through it.
Thank you for that intro, CAO staff. And just so council's aware, I've got our camera off because I'm being joined by Sean Hughes, our Chief Operator for the Water Distribution System, who's standing in for our Utility Manager, Devin. So we'll just let the, oh, there it is, PowerPoint come up. So just a few introductory comments here. Staff have prepared this emergency response plan, which not only encompasses comprehensive decision-making during drought scenarios, but also includes response for many other emergent water-related situations, including situations in the watershed or at the water plant or in our distribution system. This document will augment the existing drought management plan, which is referenced throughout the ERP, and will coincide with any necessary updates to the new water master plan, which, as Graham mentioned, is tentatively scheduled for June to come to council. To date, the ERP has been discussed with internal staff in various departments, with the Water Advisory Committee and a few members of the agricultural community. Upon council adoption, staff will contact our 20 highest irrigation users for one-on-one communication of this plan with them. And along with that, our rollout on social media and posting to our website. So there will be engagement with the agricultural users that are the high water users. The ERP document was fully written by district staff. Our water operations team benefited greatly from the process of identifying and assessing each emergency scenario. Long half-day meetings going over all the bad things that could potentially happen and how we would solution those. So a really great exercise. It was very valuable for staff to walk through it step by step. Our operations team worked very hard on this document, and we appreciate their hard work for that, and big thanks to them. Summerland has a responsibility to provide adequate fire flows, an adequate supply of irrigation water, and clean, safe drinking water to our customers, and make every effort to maintain this when an emergency occurs. Proper preparation allows the utility to react more thoughtfully and thoroughly. So sorry, I see the PowerPoint's clicking along. Can we go back to the second slide, please? Yep, thank you. So after the heat dome in June 2021 and the related staff decisions following that heat dome to alleviate stress on the water plant, we had an after action review, as CAO staff mentioned. This review showed that good decision-making tools were not in place for staff, and that this resulted in some inconsistencies over the history of the water plant on how to respond to that specific emergent event. Next slide, please. After last year's heat dome report, a report was brought to council on August 23rd. It recommended the development of a document to guide future decisions for water restrictions during emergent events. Next slide. The objective of the ERP is to provide staff with a guideline for addressing a wide range of potential water-related emergencies that Summerland may face. No two emergencies are exactly the same. This ERP is a guideline for dealing with a wide range of emergencies. Each emergency is set out with a description, a general chronological order of how to deal with the emergency, and how to document the works consistently. A task list for each emergency is also a checklist that will serve staff during the emergency. So, council, I'd just like to walk you through two examples in the ERP. So if you have your council package ready or the ERP itself, I'll call up the page numbers for you. So for example one, you can go to section 6.1 in the ERP, which is page 20 of the ERP. And if you have your council agenda package open, it's page 45 of the agenda package, if that's easier. So 20 of the ERP and 45 of your agenda package. I'll just give you a second there. And if I could just get a nod, Madam Mayor, when you're ready.
Okay, almost there. Sorry, can you say what it is again? Oh, you've got it right up on the screen.
Yeah, it's page 20 in the ERP and page 45 in your agenda package.
Okay, thank you.
It's section 6.1, water treatment plant cannot meet water demands. No surprise there. We're going to go over this example. Okay, ready?
Yes, we're good.
Okay, great. So this is the emergent scenario here on this section is that the water treatment plant cannot meet the water demand of the community. Okay, so this could be a result of a heat dome like it was last year, some extreme weather event, or high irrigation demand, or potentially failed equipment at the plant. So that could be a plug screen, motors, drives, treatment process, etc. So you see on that page of the ERP, if you look down to actions, so the first step for an operator or employee is to document the situation that they're seeing kind of before their eyes. So record the date, time, location, et cetera. And then notify the operator, supervisor, manager. And then we have from bullet point 5 down, we have about 1 page of sort of technical measures to take in the water plant. So it's checking gauges, checking status of chlorine, et cetera, et cetera. And these are all items that the operators feel are valuable points to cover when you're in this situation. So as they go through the plant, they're checking everything. Then we get to point number 8, and that's on the next page, page 21 of the ERP. And we come to first response. So all of the measures that the operators have taken to this point have not resulted in fixing the problem. The water treatment plant is still about to go over capacity, and there's nothing they can do about it in the plant in a short period of time. So the next response is to reduce customer demand. And that's point number 8. And it says, if water treatment plant cannot provide water for demand, reduce customer demand as per Appendix B. So this Appendix B is referred to in this document in a number of locations where we need to reduce customer demand. So the operators all go to 1 page, and that page is the very last page of the ERP. And in your council agenda, it's page 91. So let's turn to page 91 in your council agenda, or page 66 of the ERP, which is the last page. I'll just give you another moment. So Appendix B, last page of the ERP. So Appendix B, this says, this appendix provides a step-by-step guide for reducing customer demand for various emergencies. Step 1, community-wide voluntary usage reduction. Using the water quality notification procedures, communicate to all residents a request for reduced water use. And council, I'm just going to read this verbatim through this appendix because it's pretty important that we just kind of sort of cover every word here. Methods and forms are available in the water quality notification procedures, including media releases, social media posts, email notifications, posting on electronic sign, etc. So step number 1, again, is voluntary usage reduction by the community. Now, again, we could be in a situation because of a heat dome. We could be in a situation because of a failed pump. So this might have to happen quickly. We may have a week's notice ahead of time by watching weather. But step 1 is to ask the community overall, this is agricultural users, residential users, commercial users, please reduce your consumption.
Is it okay to take a question now, Jeremy, or did you want to go through this and then answer
Sure.
questions?
Yeah, sure. We can take questions now.
Okay, Councillor Traynor.
Jeremy, I just have a question. What kind of time frame would this voluntary step be? Like, are we talking like about a week, or like, do you know what I mean? Like, how urgent is this?
Yeah, thank you, Councillor Traynor. Through the mayor, it depends on the situation, but this could be, for instance, we could ask users to reduce their consumption for 24 hours because we have a VFD in the plant, which is a motor drive, that's acting up, or we have a cooling system that's causing us a problem. We think we can fix it over the next 24 hours. So it could be something as simple as that. For 24 hours, we ask that you just reduce your consumption. Don't water your grass. If you're an egg user, change your timers. So we'll have that information in that notification at that time. So it's situation dependent.
Okay, so I guess my question to you is, how quickly would this type of scenario would you need to get the information out? Like, is this something that would need to happen right away, or something that, you know, you would want reduction over like a couple of days?
Thank
The
you.
reason
Yeah,
why I'm asking too is just because, just to follow up quickly, is this something where we would use like Voyant Alert? Like, I don't know if we have that system or not, but I'm wondering, depending on how quickly you need to get these out, would that be an effective tool for this kind of situation?
Thank you, Councillor, through the mayor. That would be an excellent tool for this. The ERP, we wrote it without mentioning Voyant because it's not a system we have available to us today. But on next year's update of this document, and we'll be updating it and keeping it up to date every year, we will change some of the wording to include that Voyant system. So yes, that's definitely an excellent tool, and it's a tool we will want to use. For now, we would be using the things that are listed in our water quality notification procedure, which is social media, media releases, email notifications, electronic sign, things like that.
Graham.
Yeah, thank you, Madam Mayor, and through to Councillor Trainer. Just to further enhance Jeremy's comment. So sometimes we have an emergency that's caused by an equipment failure, so we're doing things in real time. The heat dome sort of example, which this would also apply to, is kind of an emergency in slow motion, right? So we'd have a lot more time to properly notify, get our game plan together, and do the legwork ahead of really the high temperatures hitting us. And that's where we could have a lot more of that focused communication with the public too. In both cases, though, we would be looking to Voyant Alert to now enhance our other communication avenues. And that is, I think the next month or two, we'll be ready with that. So it's just not ready yet.
Any other questions? Okay, please carry on.
Okay, thank you. So just to summarize again, we have a water capacity problem at the plant, and we've tried everything we can in the plant, and now we've decided we need to reduce customer demand. So just continuing on, the first step is to ask for voluntary reduction by the community overall. Next step, voluntary usage reduction by highest irrigation users. So this is voluntary, and it's for the ag community and our highest users, our highest 20 users. So I'll just read it out loud here. Utility manager and or water operators to contact voluntary highest irrigation users list and request irrigation timing adjustments or irrigation turnoffs. This list is to be updated annually by water utility staff. Metering data is collected for the 20 highest use irrigators. Irrigators are given the choice to be on the voluntary list to help during emergencies. Contact information is updated annually, and each customer agrees to the best method of communication, be it email, text, etc. Any questions there?
Yes, one from Councillor Van Elfen.
Thank you. You talk about the top 20 agricultural irrigation users. Are you not including golf courses, school districts, District of Summerland in this, or are they automatically shutting off? And then you're going to the 20 voluntary agricultural users.
Thank you, Councillor, through the mayor. This is using our ag customer list, which is actually doesn't differentiate between the golf course and some of our regular ag community users. So it's just an irrigation list. And the golf course is on there. So the school is not in that top 20. And just for your awareness. But we would take the previous year's consumption. So for this year, it would be then 2021 consumption. And we would add every month of usage up for all customers. And then we take the top 20 users in terms of volume for that entire season. And we would contact those 20 users and ask if they would be on this voluntary list. And the reason we felt the voluntary list would be useful is because during some of our meetings with the water committee, it was suggested that there's many users in the community that would volunteer to reduce or change their habits to help the community during an emergency. We had that feedback, so we felt we would do that first before moving on to any sort of mandatory shutoff.
Okay. Councillor Carlson.
Thank you. Just another thing to consider during that, and maybe it was in the water committee conversation, but there's probably 5 or 6 producers in this community who have multiple orchard locations, but aren't necessarily going to trigger a highest use. So I can just think, you know, myself included, we have 11 orchards or 12 orchards in operation, but none of them are going to be in the top 20 of your list. However, as an actual overall acreage and producer, you would be wise to have those folks on the list of people who might be able to reduce their consumption, because over that large number of orchards, it's a significant amount of water.
That's a great comment. Thank you for that. We currently, through the mayor, the list is by address, but we could consider lumping addresses together. It's just that when the works on-call individual goes to shut off water, they'll be going to a specific address, and we're trying to get as much bang for our turnoff as we can. Right now, the top 20 irrigation addresses represent just under 20% of the usage for August. So if we were to turn those 20 off, they almost represent 1% per user. As you get lower in the list, it's less than that, but it's around 19% for the top 20. And that's by address.
Councillor Van Alphen.
Thank you. Just a question through to our Director of Utilities. So you said sending staff out to shut off the water. If I'm a voluntary person, I can shut my water off myself.
Mm-hmm.
All I have to do is turn the valve off on my side of the blue box and I'm off. You don't have to send staff out to do that. But, you know, like if you're asking, you know, for volunteers, fine. I just shut my water off. It's quite simple. Staff doesn't have to come off and turn the valve in the street. Thank you.
Thank you. Good point, Councillor. I was actually going to step 3 in the next step where we would physically go out and turn off, but you're absolutely right about that. We would just be making a call to irrigators and they'd be taking action on their own.
Okay.
Okay, continuing on. So that was step 2. So both step 1 and step 2 are voluntary. Then into step 3, this is the mandatory highest irrigation users turnoff. So utility manager to contact works infrastructure on-call number and notify of emergency and the level of urgency for irrigation turnoffs. Works and infrastructure admin staff also called in. Then provide works and infrastructure on-call and works and infrastructure admin staff with highest irrigation users list. Works and infrastructure admin staff begin communicating with customers on the list and answer inquiries. Internal notifications via email sent to all stakeholders. Works and infrastructure on-call staff to systematically turn off customers on the list, on the mandatory list. Place turned off tag on the blue box when they do so, and physically record each customer turned off on the list and the time of turn off. So we'll have a template ready with everyone on the list, and that on-call individual is handed that list and they go location by location. Works infrastructure on call to provide copy of the mandatory list record to water distribution system operator. This list is to be updated annually by water utility staff. Metering data is collected for the 15 highest use irrigators. Those customers are contacted and informed they are on the list and the possible circumstances that the list may be used. Contact information is updated annually and each customer agrees to best method of communication. And so council is aware the top 15 irrigators equate to 16% of our water demand for the month of August. And that was in 2020.
Councillor Barkwell.
So the alternative to, once you've worked your way down to the voluntary irrigators, would be for a boil water advisory, wouldn't it be?
Thank you, Councillor Barkwell. Actually, we would list it as to open the supplemental line. And we're going to go back to section 6.1 and talk about that.
Okay, so the opening the supplemental line results in a boil water notice.
That's correct.
I really have a problem with a mandatory irrigation turnoff, and I can explain my reasoning there. Prior to the increase in the standards for water treatment, there was plenty of water for the domestic users and the growers. And when the standard was introduced and we had to provide additional treatment through the water treatment plant, that additional treatment needed to be paid for by the domestic users. And if the domestic users, and so each year we add more domestic users, which just takes us to the point where that plant can't treat all the water, as it happened in the water dome. That was a decision made consciously, that knowing that it was too expensive to build a plant that would require treatment of all the water we could potentially use, especially as additional users are added to the system. So if the domestic users don't want to pay for the cost of treating their water, why would you shut off the irrigator? The irrigator's got the water, it's licensed for storage, it's licensed for use, and you're going to shut them off because the domestic users haven't paid for a plant that can treat the domestic water adequately? I don't think I can support that plan. I think if you can't get enough of a reduction voluntarily, then you're going to have to go to your supplemental and go through the boil water notice. But I'll listen to alternative arguments, but that's how I kind of look at it right now.
Madam Mayor, if I may, if we were to go back to the section 6.1, there is some more information that council may want to consider before getting into debate.
Can you give us an idea of which page we're on, please, again?
That will be going to page 21 on the ERP. 21 on the ERP.
Thanks for the reminder.
And we can go to the next slide as well. So good discussion so far. So after, and this is all proposed, after a irrigation turnoff, then we move to the next step, which is step 9 on that page, which is open the supplemental line. So I'll just read it verbatim here. If staff identify that an 8-hour outage of the irrigation users is not long enough for the water treatment plant to recover, then we go through opening the supplemental line and the various steps associated with that. So just so council's aware, what we're proposing here is an 8-hour turnoff, and then opening the supplemental, doing a boil water, and turning back on irrigators. So that's the draft plan as of right now. And that closes example 1. And Madam Mayor, if it's good with council, maybe we just talk about example 1 and we can put example 2 on hold for now. It's almost a repeat of what we talked about with subtle differences, but.
Okay, do you have a question? I have a question. So we're down to if the first response doesn't work, we're looking at the second response. Is there what kind of I guess, what am I asking here? How quickly will we know if, not we, council, but will staff know if the first response is not adequate?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. It's situation dependent. Difficult to say or guess right now, but say if it was a failed motor that was causing this issue, and it was related to the variable frequency drive that drives the motor, and maybe it's overheating because of a failed air conditioning unit, something along those lines, we may be able to action this within 8 hours and have everything back up and running. We go back, turn the irrigators on, and the situation is no longer an emergency and it's passed. That would be similar to what happened last year. There may be other situations where the plant is running at full capacity and we just hit the capacity of the plant because of heat dome, and it puts us to the point where it's going to be like this for a week. So we're going to be going over capacity for a week long period, let's say, and in that situation, we've tried the turnoffs to get us through our peak of the day, and that didn't work. That maybe got us through the peak, but it appears that the next day is going to be just as bad. In that situation, we'd be turning irrigators back on, opening the supplemental, because we know we're in this for a week or so, and we're just on a boil water at that point. And we go through a notification procedure associated with that. So it's very difficult to say sitting here now on how long it would be and how long we'd have to action our fix, if there even was a fix.
Okay, and then I guess my follow-up question to that would be, when we're at the first response portion, oh darn, I lost it. First response portion, whether it be voluntary community-wide or voluntary highest ag users, will there be ongoing notification to the agricultural users that we are, we've started step 1, we've started step 2, so that they have notice about the third piece, the mandatory piece, if that's the way that this ultimately plays out?
Thank you, Madam Mayor.
I just don't want it to be. I think to me that would avoid what happened last year, in that suddenly some agricultural users were experiencing, no water. If they had kind of a rundown on where we were in the voluntary steps of that. Am I making sense?
Yes, I'm following you, Madam Mayor. Those are good comments. I guess it depends on the situation. If it's a sudden emergent event, it may be difficult to call them ahead of time while we're walking through the first 2 steps to contact those on the 3rd step. But if it's like a heat dome, as happened last year, we have time to prepare for that, and we can communicate with all those users ahead of time and say, hey, heads up, in a couple days, this might happen. So, and certainly when we get Buoyant up and running, that will make that quite a bit easier. I feel that calling them ahead of time, say this time of year, April timeframe, and updating their contact information is probably absolute best practice, which would likely even better than an app installed on their cell phone, because they can give us the latest information for their leasees, et cetera. And we have a number to call and a name, and we call that number. So that makes communicating with them very quick and easy by doing that work ahead of time in the year. So I don't know if that answers your question there.
Yeah, it does answer my question. Ideally, when a voluntary community-wide notice or request has gone out, anyone that's in the community will, well, hopefully the majority of people within the community will be alerted to it at that point, and that would include agricultural users ideally. Councillor Barkwell?
So the critical thing here in the mandatory shut off is that it would never be more than 8 hours.
That's correct.
And you would have, and it would probably be on one of the 15 people you've already contacted to on a voluntary basis who have said no. And then you would say, because it's the same list, right? And so then you'd say, okay, we haven't been able to reduce it enough among those who volunteer to cut back for 8 hours. And so we are going to shut you off regardless, but not more than 8 hours. So the question is 8 hours going to be damaging to anybody? Doesn't seem like it, but I can't say for sure.
Councillor Van Elfen?
I believe not. On the Ag Water or the Water Advisory Committee, there was a bunch of growers that were shut off on Giants Head Road in their last heat dome. And I don't think any of them had any substantial damages done. You know, I mean, I think some of them didn't even notice the water was turned off. You know, I think the biggest problem was some of them are on timers, and it kind of threw things out of whack for them. But all in all, I don't think, you know, 8 hours is not going to destroy a crop of any significance, of any type of crop. I just, you know, maybe I'm just being silly, and I think, Madam Mayor, you kind of touched on it. In an emergency situation, I think, sure, let's talk to the 15 highest users in the agricultural community, but let's talk to the whole community. You know, I might be in a situation that I'm a week before cutting hay, and I could shut my water off and be part of the solution for a few days. It's not going to hurt my crop. You know, a cherry grower might just have finished harvesting in that one orchard and may be able to shut off for a day or two also, you know, but I think it's a community thing. We all need to participate in this. I mean, to go after the top 15 highest users, fine. But I think we got a great community we live in, you know, and as a, let's say, a residential owner, well, I'm not going to water my lawn. Even though it is my day to water my lawn, I think I'll hold off just to be part of the solution. So I think the communication thing is highly important, that we get it out to everybody saying, hey, as a community, we're having a problem. Can we all work together? And, you know, maybe 8 hours is cut down to even less if we're all be able to conserve. Anyways, thanks, Madam Mayor.
Thank you. CAO Stat.
Yeah, that's absolutely right, Madam Mayor, through to Councillor Van Elfen. And we're going from a state where there's really no plan, no concrete codified practice, to one now where we're being intentional. And that is absolutely what we want to provide, is to the extent possible, no surprises for users, whether they be high or low volume users. And so step one is that community-wide voluntary usage reduction. So we'd be going to the community, and we do have a good community. I was actually, as recent as this morning, I had a phone call from Jason Sweeney at the golf course, who I think is our largest user of our water system, particularly obviously in those summer months, who said, I just wanted to let you know I want to be a volunteer provider to reduce in the case, and he's looking forward to further conversations with the district on how they can tie in and how the plan works and how they can support. And they've been a really good partner, and they're one of the largest ones. So I think with the more intentional framing and putting a bookend to it, not more than 8 hours, that we will be able to provide a structure that people can be familiarized with, understand ahead of time, and not be surprised when we're rolling it out and what the next steps are.
Right. And if we do get to that supplemental line and there's a water advisory, well, we've done everything we can and the community has responded how they have, and that's what we're facing. Councillor Trainer and then Councillor Carlson.
I'm not sure how much water residents use to water their lawns and stuff in the summer. Like, I don't know what kind of percentage that is, but, sorry? 24%? Oh, wow. Okay. So in step one, to me, asking people to not water their lawns would be like, and instead of volunteering to not, like making that mandatory, to me, that would be one of the first things that we could do, because we don't really need that. You know, you don't need to water your lawn, absolutely. Whereas like we need to drink water and we need to be able to water our orchards. So is that something that would be like, could we put that into step one where, you know, if it will make a difference, maybe that should be something that's mandatory, so that, you know, during this voluntary phase, if you're walking down the street and your neighbor's watering their lawn, like that would irritate me if that then leads to a boil water notice. Like I'd rather see brown lawns and not have to boil my water than have green lawns and boiling my water.
I need to make a correction, sorry. The 24% is domestic use. So it's not all outdoor use.
Okay, that's, I know, I thought 24 was a bit high. Anyway, I just, even if like asking people, like when we're at that voluntary stage or step one, for making the, like that you're not allowed to water your lawn mandatory in that stage, maybe that will chip away a little bit at reducing our water usage.
Madam Mayor, if you don't mind, I'll just respond to Councillor Trainer.
Yes, please go ahead.
Thank you. So just some more numbers for you. You're correct. It's 26% for the year, and that's all domestic use. All domestic use is 26% of our total usage. But for the month of August, that actually goes down to 19%. So for August, 19% of the total month's usage is domestic. Now, what percentage of the domestic is for irrigating lawns? That I'm not sure, but all domestic use is 19% for August.
Thanks, Jeremy. That's good to know. So, I mean, maybe even if 2 or 3% of that is attributed to lawn watering, I still think that that would make a difference.
According to OBWB website, 70% of the domestic water is used out of doors. So it's a lot. Councillor Carlson and then Councillor Holmes.
Thank you. Just the reason this whole thing came up is because people weren't told that their water was going to be turned off. I think that in a situation like this, if we say, hey, we got to turn your water off, mandatory, if someone says, no, you can't do that, and they give us a reason why we can't do that, then we shouldn't turn their water off, and we find someone else who's willing or able to reduce that input. It's all about communication. It's not about farmers trying to wreck the water treatment facility and about people trying to use too much water. It's simply about having a way of talking to them and making sure that they know what it is and why. And if, you know, they're going to lose their crop because we turn the water for 8 hours, they need to be able to argue why they don't want their water turned off. And I don't see that being an issue at all.
Councillor Holmes.
Yeah, thank you. Back to Councillor Trainer's point, you know, I think I'm probably not as willing as Councillor Barkwell is to just flip on the supplemental line. I think we all remember those days, and I certainly don't want to go back to having these regular boil water notices. But to Councillor Trainer's point, why for the 8-hour outage would we limit it to just the highest irrigation users? Why not ban domestic lawn watering? Why not other irrigation users as well? Why just limit it, for that 8-hour period just to the highest irrigation users?
Thank you, Councillor. to the mayor. The domestic water users can be regulated using our bylaws for water restrictions. So we have various levels for water restrictions. And last year we had water restrictions in place well before the heat dome. I had heard we were ahead of the OBWB recommendations, but I'm not sure about that, or other regulators in the valley. So that tool is still available to us. It's not what I would consider an emergency response tool. We could include banning all domestic irrigation as part of a step 3 and have a Facebook post out saying as much. It would require bylaw change on the water restrictions to do that. So it would have to live partly outside of this document as well. It's a valid point, but on top of that, because in August, the domestic usage is only 19% of the total usage, even a ban in that at that time for domestic use may only move that percentage a percent or two, whereas the top 15 irrigators do represent a full 16%, almost as much as all of domestic combined. So it's a quick way to, it's a true emergency. So it's a quick way to lower consumption and reduce customer demand very quickly so we can address an emergent situation. So that's sort of what a step 3 is. It's really a last resort at that point. And we've tried almost everything before that, and we're likely on water restrictions already. Just a comment there. Thank you.
Yep, that's a good point. Emergency is an emergency, I guess. Councillor Barkwell and then Councillor Van Elfen.
That's sort of the point I was going to say too. We're talking about two different things. We're talking about developing situations and an emergency situation in the middle of the night type of thing, where trying to have people shut off their lawn sprinklers, you're just not going to reach many in a short period of time. But I wanted to follow up on what Councillor Carlson said. It sounded like maybe she was suggesting that we shouldn't have the mandatory. If you can't do it voluntarily, the grower says, you know, I just can't, or I'm not comfortable, or I don't want to take any chances. We should live with that and just go to the next person. Is basically what you were implying, Councillor Carlson, and not have the mandatory and not say, okay, we don't believe you, you're not being reasonable, we're going to shut your water off?
Well, I think that we need to talk to people before we shut their water off. And that's where I'm getting at. I mean, it's like when back in 2017, we declared a state of emergency, but forgot to tell the farmers we were, going in and doing things on their properties. I mean, you can't just say, well, we have it in a plan here, so we're just going to go ahead and do what we want to do on your private property. I don't think. And so talking to them and making sure that what you're doing, they understand why you're doing it. Maybe they will have understand it's for 4 hours or 8 hours. But when you just turn something off in the middle of the night and then they're expecting it back by a certain time and that doesn't happen, that's why this whole thing happened, right? So you can call it mandatory or you can call it, you got to consult with people.
That's what this is all about, is the water emergency response plan. That's what it's all about.
But if someone says, no, I will lose my nursery trees or I will lose my seedlings, or then it's no longer I guess it's no longer mandatory because they say, no, I'm going to sue you, then we can't turn their water off.
So
I think we're getting into the weeds a bit here, but no. Councillor Van Elfen and then Councillor Barkley.
No, I appreciate where Councillor Carlson's coming from. If I can make a suggestion, like let's make the list 20. Let's do 25 just for that scenario. It may be a greenhouse that's one of the top water users and they're right in a crucial time of growing seedlings of some sort, and say, you know, like 8 o'clock at night, they get notification to shut off, and they say, geez, I can't, I'm going to lose thousands of dollars worth of product here, then go to the next guy. You know, maybe we make the list 20 or 25 or 30, just in case we do have those growers that are in a crucial period. I appreciate what our Director of Utilities is doing here. I appreciate this plan. We have to have it, but let's just make the list larger. It doesn't have to be the top 15 users. Just keep going down the line and increase it. If I happen to
So
be
you're
on-
talking about the voluntary
Yep.
list, yes?
Yep. You know, and even the mandatory list, Madam Mayor. If I'm a top 15 user and I'm on the mandatory list, but I just happen to have seeded my crop in a greenhouse, and it's crucial that I have water, maybe me as a neighbor will step up and say, sure, shut mine off, you know, because I'm between crops right now or something. I think it's got to be somewhat flexible. So let's just increase the user list, and they call and say, no, it's not a good time for me. The next guy, sure. And we'll still get the 15 out of the 30, possibly. I'm not trying to create more work or headaches, but I don't know. Yeah, it's kind of up to our director, I guess, to tell me if I'm out there.
Did you want to respond, or can I go to Councillor Barkwell?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Yeah, I can throw out some comments. Thank you, Councillor Van Alphen. In reviewing our irrigators list, if you look at the top, say 10 users or top 8 users, but you look further down on the list and say you get down to user number 30, it would take 3 or 4 user number 30s to make up the equivalent water for, say, user number 4 or number 5. So your list starts to get pretty long when those top 15 don't participate. So that's why the voluntary list is 20, because that's looking at the list, and we did look at this critically. Looking at the top 20, we felt that, okay, even if half said no, well, we still have 10 on that top 20 list, and that's really good impact for us. And they can change timers or what have you. But when we get into that emergency where the plant is definitely going to go over capacity, and it's going to do so in the next 3 hours, we need to act quickly at that point. And so we wanted to keep the list as short as possible, but get as much bang for our buck for each turnoff. So just wanted to throw that out there, that top 15 users is that 16%. And so when we start getting to the 16th user, 17th, 18th, they just aren't using nearly as much as the top 10 are. It really starts to drop off very quickly. Just food for thought there.
Thank you. Councillor Barkwell.
So right now, there's the voluntary list and the mandatory list, and they're the same people. And it sounds like, I mean, I'm trying to, make up my mind here that Councillor Carlson and Van Alphen are saying we should make it entirely voluntary, and that we don't want to, and if we can't meet our needs voluntarily, then we have to open the supplemental line. And voluntarily means the consultation and everything that Councillor Carlson was talking about, but not ever if somebody said no and had their reasons, and they have their reasons, and some might be construed as reasonable and some unreasonable by a third party, that we respect that, and we don't shut their water off, and we go to the next one and go as far as we can go. Is that what I'm hearing? Is that your, as a farmer and a agriculturalist, your recommendation? Because I'm leaning towards you. I'm putting a lot of weight on your view.
Okay, before you answer, we need to hear from CAO Stat I think that we're going into the weeds a little bit here. We don't even have a motion on the table yet, and we're doing this back and forthing. So go ahead, CEO Stat.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. We don't mind the weeds on this one because that devil is where the details are for sure. So I'll just say a couple things. First of all, I actually think there's no harm at all. In fact, probably value in growing the step 1 voluntary list. Fair comment. And the longer that list is, it might avoid a step 2 mandatory. But a key policy decision is whether we have a mandatory. And our advice is that we do, because we're talking about an emergency in the top 15. And I had a lot of informative phone calls last June from users when the water was shut off. And what I heard wasn't so much the issue of the water being shut off from those users who called me. It was, first of all, not knowing the water was shut off. So no one called the users in many cases, middle of the night, either don't have a number or it's the wrong number, or the owner of the land isn't the one that's actually farming the land. And so the water was turned off, didn't know it was turned off. And then in some cases, the water was turned back on, but because they didn't know it was turned off to start with, their system of quadrant watering was watering the wrong quadrant because that one already had water on it, but the other one's been dry for 8 hours. So coming back to the communication issue as well. And in other cases, being told the water would be turned back on and it wasn't. So now you've had an extended delay for this particular individual who now has direct impact. So all that just to say, my assessment to that and the conversations that I had, and I had a number of them with these users who are directly and adversely impacted, it was about the communication, making sure we get that right. Call in the middle of the night, even if you need to, it doesn't matter. I can adjust my operations, but I really need to know. And I think based on that, if we put a sort of a parameter around it in terms of the 8 hours and only using that mandatory in a truly emergent situation, it would be our recommendation that we keep a mandatory provision. But all painting it within that light of it's the last tool in the toolbox that we're using, and we're very selective in using it.
Thank you, Councillor Carlson. Go ahead.
Thank you. So you're having a conversation with someone and you're telling them, we really need to turn your water off. This is a mandatory step in our process. And they say, no, you can't do that. What do we do about that? Right? I mean, I guess that's my concern, is that now I believe they should still have the ability to say, no, I'm sorry, but I need my water. And this is the reason. And I guess that's why makes it hard to be a mandatory thing, because it might impact someone. It's not going to impact someone growing hay. It's probably not going to impact someone growing cherries, but it might impact the neighbors who just seeded 10 million seedlings, and that's why I think there still needs to be consideration, but perhaps that doesn't need to be in the policy. That needs to be in the people who are doing those conversations. Thank you.
Okay, anyone else on this matter? There is a resolution there that the water emergency response plan be adopted. Councillor Van Elfen.
Thank you, Madam Mayor, that the water emergency response plan be adopted.
Okay, seconder, Councillor Traynor. Councillor Van Elfen, and then Councillor Holmes.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I hats off to our Director of Utilities and all the people that have worked on this plan. It's a plan, it's a start. Is it gonna be 100% perfect right off the get-go? We don't know that. We'll find out if we have an emergency, and hopefully we don't. I got my fingers crossed we don't run into another heat dome situation like we did last year. But if we do, we have a plan. If it works, it's a great plan. If it doesn't work, we'll tweak the plan. But at least we got something to start with. And again, hats off to staff and our CAO for bringing this forward. Thank you.
Councillor Holmes.
Thank you. Yeah, I agree. It's a good start. When I read all the, going through all the potential emergencies, it seemed a bit like applying Murphy's Law to public policy. And and just the one question I had is, I saw earthquake and everything like that, but the one thing that came into my mind was what about the threat of wildfire? The threat of wildfire to the water treatment plant, to our dams, to our reservoir intake, whatever. I didn't see that anywhere. I mean, and so I'm not sure. So if there's an evacuation order, for example, at the water treatment plant, how do we deal with that? So that was one question in my mind. I thought that was missing. And my only other comment was the contact list. Whenever I see that in a plan like this, it kind of scares me because they can go out of date really quick. And if all our different emergency plans and whatever other kind of things we have all have these kind of probably the same contact list, would we not be better off having just one central district-wide list for everything rather than having somebody update multiple lists of the same thing every year? So that's just a kind of a question or suggestion or whatever. Thanks.
Councillor Barkwell.
So, I mean, it's a great, it's a great plan. It's a staff tool. I'm sure it'll help. But after listening to the conversation here, I can't support the plan because I can't support the mandatory aspect of it. If you can't get what you want through the voluntary list, I don't want to put a staff person in the position of saying, well, I don't believe you that your seedlings will all die, so I'm going to turn your water off, or I don't think that because you haven't planned, this was your day of the week and it's been hot and dry and you didn't water, and you were going to water today and they haven't been watered all week, and you don't want to turn your water off, but I'm going to turn it off anyway. I don't want to put that staff person in that position. I think it should be entirely voluntary. I think people will, in all cases or most cases and enough cases, be reasonable, and the mandatory aspect doesn't fly for me.
Councillor Traynor.
Just to clarify with our CAO, and I guess Jeremy as well, step 3 we'd only get to step 3 if we were like at an extreme case, right? An absolute emergency. So I think that you have to, I totally sympathize with the farmers, but I think that we also have to step back and look at the system as a whole. And I think staff have to have a tool in an emergency that we don't even know what that emergency could be like. I mean, we've outlined cases here, but who knows what it could be. And I think that staff have to have a tool for the greater good of the community, where they can make a call. Because if they don't have that, then we don't know what could happen. So to me, using the word mandatory, it's the last resort tool that is there if we need it, and that is to protect the greater good. And so I do think that it needs to be there. And I think that we won't need to get there if, like Councillor Barkwell said, all of the farmers or the highest users do step up and volunteer, then we won't have to get there. But I think there has to be something in writing that protects the system, that we only use if we absolutely necessary. And so for that reason, I will be supporting this.
I'm just going to weigh in, then I'll go to Councillor Van Alphen again. I agree with Councillor Traynor. I think that there needs to be, I think that this is a really important tool. We've heard from our CAO that the mandatory piece of it really is a critical step to be used only if absolutely necessary. And although we've just had a couple of examples given here, it does say in the request for decision that it isn't just related to drought scenarios, as was it's related to other emergent issues, including situations in the watershed as a whole. And I would think that that would include an imminent danger from wildfire to our water quality or to the water treatment plant itself. So I think that this is, it covers a broad enough emergent situations, and they truly are emergent. I hear what you're saying, Councillor Barkwill, but I think that there does need to be a mandatory step in this. I think it's, as much as we want to protect the agricultural activities in Summerland, people come first, I think. And if we can protect the water for all of the community, that's the way of protecting it for the agricultural people as well. As human beings, I mean. Councillor Councillor Van Elfen, and then to Councillor Carlson.
I just think, I appreciate what Councillor Traynor is saying also, and yourself, Madam Mayor. I think the big key here is it's 8 hours. It's an 8-hour situation in a mandatory, and after 8 hours, they turn the bypass on. I'm hoping that, staff, common sense will prevail. If there's a situation where a farmer is in dire straits, then maybe they go on to the next one or what have you. But I'm hoping it can work with the voluntary aspect of it, and I cannot see why it can't. I know this community, I think, quite well, and if I have to shut my water off for the greater good, then I do so. If the District of Summerland is going to stops watering the parks, they will do so. The school district can be notified, they'll do so. We all just got to pull together in these critical times, and hopefully we never get to a mandatory, but I understand why the wording has to be there. But again, just so we all are clear, it's 8 hours tops. Thanks.
Councillor Carlson.
So unless in the voluntary step, we put a complete ban on watering using domestic water to water lawns, I won't be supporting this either. I think that before we turn anybody's irrigation water off, we tell everybody they must turn their lawn, especially their lawn water, off. And I think last year when the heat dome happened, one of the challenges too is that we tell people to water at night. And the water got turned off at night because lots of people have also, for their domestic lawn watering, it's set up to come on at nighttime. So unless we deal with that problem first, I won't be supporting turning irrigation water off by mandatory means.
Okay, any final comments? Councillor Barkwill.
Further to the fact that I think that the voluntary high user turn off should be enough, and it's not fair to ask somebody who doesn't want to and believes that there could be loss to turn off their irrigation water, which is unlikely. That the reason we've gotten in that situation is because we've added too many domestic users to the system to support watering the domestic users and the farmers. It's not the farmers' fault. So I think we're maybe talking long enough about an unlikely scenario, but in principle, I don't think I can't support mandatory. I think it should be voluntary.
Okay, I'm going to call the question. All in favor? Opposed? So that carries. Thank you. That was a good discussion. On to 7.3, water infrastructure for heat waves. Speaking of heat domes, again, we'll go to CAO Stat for introduction.
Well, thank you, Your Worship. Council will recall an initial discussion in January about options for a water fill station and associated equipment to support the public in a time of heat wave or heat dome event. As promised, staff have prepared a report by May this month with further analysis and options regarding to water infrastructure for heat waves. There's been some good analysis done on what other communities are doing and what they did last year as well, and what we could choose to potentially do in the future. Public engagement is recommended if further steps are taken to make sure the approach taken meets the needs of the community. With that, I'll turn things over to our Sustainability and Alternative Energy Coordinator to speak about the report. Thank you.
All right, thank you so much. So as CAO Graham mentioned, I've got a report here and just summarizing it in a PDF format, a PowerPoint format here. So it'll be very high level, and any other questions I can definitely elaborate on from the report that I've provided. So as we know, last year we had an unprecedented and highly impactful heat wave. As per the recent IPCC report from February this year, we know conclusively that heat waves and other climate extremes and events are pretty much guaranteed to happen in greater intensity and frequency. So this is not something that is going to be a one-off. This is something that is going to impact the District of Summerland as well as the region moving forward. In order to do that, providing adaptive measures and provisions to address these heat waves and other events is really essential. So as requested by Councillor Traynor, this infrastructure research has gone into what other communities have done, as well as what would potentially be applicable for the District of Summerland. So with the community responses, I looked at Peachland, Summerland as well, Ashcroft, and the city of Penticton. Just to start off with Summerland, to highlight some of the things that the community did last year, we opened up our cooling centers, as well as a couple of their facilities. I believe it was the Summerland Resource Center that provided space, food, and water for those who may be impacted. We also provided social media updates on where things were being opened or provisions in place for the public. And then we also mentioned here that there's food and water that was given out to the public just at those centers. They weren't provided in other capacities. So the city of Penticton, this was particularly brought up by council that they had water bottle fillers. So there are a total of 9 of them in the community, and these were available to the public during the heat wave and overall just available to the community throughout the year. They also provided cooling centers, social media posts, and they also provided a city hotline so people could call to find out more information about what resources were available or options for them if they were part of the vulnerable population there. District of Peachland also provided a cooling center, and they also had select bottle filling stations, more of the wall-mounted ones than the pedestal ones that were seen in Penticton. And Ashcroft, they provided a report summarizing some of the kind of highlights and important considerations for the heat wave. So just 2 areas that they highlighted were cooling centers and education and awareness. So just to show some of the items that Penticton provided, the mapping here just shows the different locations where the bottle filling stations are. There's also 2 specifically for dogs. So they have a kind of a bubbler at the very bottom for dogs to use, and they're located at dog parks. And then this is just a screenshot of some of their announcements that they made through social media and online, demonstrating what places are open during what time. So that was quite effective on their end. So in looking at infrastructure, first and foremost, I took a look at the water bottle fillers and the buggies. These were specifically noted by Councillor Traynor, as well as some of the others, for ways in which water could be distributed to the community in some sort of in a way that is accessible than taps or going into a business. So the buggies are definitely more expensive. They're higher cost. They are kind of limited in mobility just due to their size, as well as some of them are trailer based. So you'll bring them onto the back of a truck and they'll bring them to a location. However, they do have the benefit that they can be used year round for larger events, and possibly the cost subsidized through rentals through community organizations or events throughout the year. So the pedestal water bottle fillers, they ranged in price just depending on the size, but also the brand. So those ones are the same ones that were used or a similar style used by Penticton. So they can be strategically placed in town depending on where a water main is located. They're also more compact, and they also offer a few different styles to accommodate bottle filling, your dogs, or also people who just want to take a drink, or it could potentially also be accessibility based so that people who are lower or shorter can also use them. And they're also lower in cost. So for the tents, that was also a consideration just for shade. That ranges from a few hundred to 500 plus. It does have its limitations just based off of interior health recommendations, basically stating you shouldn't be outside after about 40 degrees. So the tents can provide shade, but generally people shouldn't be outside to use them. And then misters, of course, was the last one here. It was noted that staff had created kind of a makeshift mister. I haven't been able to locate it or find out if it's still available, but I can keep digging. But there is that option to purchase new ones and then put them underneath the tents or provide them in spaces like gondolas or things like that if we want to provide a small contained area. So these are just examples of what some of the pieces of infrastructure look like. So at the very top, there's the single pedestal, which is the exact same model and style that Penticton has used. And then you have your alternatives with a couple extra fountain pieces. The single one with the bubbler there is just a different brand, but it's a little more square-based than circular, so it depends on your style. And then these are some of the more higher-end mobile pieces, the buggies and such. So these you typically will see more at the events capacity. There we go. So the next slide here just shows an example of some parts of the community where water mains are located as a way to kind of emphasize where we would be limited if we were to do a pedestal style infrastructure installation. Depending on where you put it, it might lie on or near a main, but with the buggies, those can be varied depending on what style you go for. So for adaptation to heat waves, the community and corporate climate action plans both support actions towards this. There's actions related to addressing climate risks as well as addressing directly heat and poor air quality, which is either because of heat or because of forest fires. So there's a couple areas within those two plans that any actions provided today could potentially support and advance for those two documents. So it should be noted that while infrastructure is one possible way to address heat waves, it is only one. There's a number of other avenues that can be taken through policy development or enhancing our current documents to directly provide policy or bylaw guidance for future landscaping or other provisions for the community that can address more cohesively community, social, environmental, and potentially economic factors with heat waves. So with that, another consideration is interior health. It was noted in the specific climate action plan that there are provisions for developing a heat wave or notification system. While though that pilot is no longer in action, the information from those pilots from last year is provided on Interior Health's webpage. And so there are a number of other resources that can be used to help advance outside of infrastructure-based approaches to heat waves and extreme heat events. There we go. So just to finalize things, there's 4 recommendations that myself have provided within the report there. The first one, just accepting this as information, as well as advising on what type of infrastructure, if that is the direction for council, and which ones and which types would like to be examined further, as well as recommendation to develop engagement as part of an infrastructure investment, if that is a road that council would like to take. And then lastly, looking into more medium and long-term adaptation strategies for heat waves and extreme heat outside of the infrastructure, possible investment if council so chooses. That's everything. Thank you.
Councillor Carlson.
Thank you. I'm just wondering if we have any functional water fountains right now in Summerland.
From talking with staff, we do have some spigots. I don't know if they're currently all active, but I know there was one at Memorial Park, and I think a couple others that are just kind of wall-based, but they're either not working or they've been requested to be turned off, so they aren't 100% reliable at this point.
Just to follow that, I think it's important that there are places for people to access clean potable drinking water and fill water bottles. Memorial Park would be an example. Down at Peach Orchard or Rotary Beach would be another example of places where I do believe we should be, whether it's through this or some other sort of permanent feature. I do think it has nothing to do with a heat wave. It has everything to do with providing water to people. Thank you.
Councillor Traynor.
Thank you so much for this report. It had a lot of really good information in it. I like the idea of the pedestal, the same kind that Penticton has. I think if we had one or two of those downtown, and then like Councillor Carlson said, maybe one at Rotary Beach or Lower Town somewhere, I think that that would be a really great thing to provide our residents with and our tourists this summer. I like the idea of having the one with the dog water at the bottom as well, because dogs are really important to people here. Yeah, I mean, I think that this is great for a number of reasons, the heat dome primarily being one. And, you know, this takes the onus off of two businesses having to provide water for people if they're, you know, walking around downtown and that they know that they can go and get water here. I don't think that we need the tents anymore. I had originally presented that because I kind of thought if we had portable watering stations, the tent would just go over to protect them and to protect people while they were getting water. But I mean, I don't really think that that's necessary anymore. I do like the direction that Penticton's gone. And I think you said Peachland had these fill stations as well in your report?
Through the chair, they had more wall-mounted ones. So they
Okay.
were in a couple different public spaces, but they weren't the pedestal style.
Okay. All right. I think that for the cost, I think it's a reasonable investment for our community. And I was going to make one more point, and it's not coming to me. I lost it. But anyway, that's what, oh, I know. Is there any kind of grant funding that we can get for this? And could we use any of our climate action funds for this? I don't think we can, but I'll ask it again because I kind of forgot.
Through the chair to Councillor Traynor. The grant funding, there is a possible one through Infrastructure Canada that goes for green infrastructure, and it does provide provisions for adaptation, resilience, and disaster mitigation. However, from what I can see, it's not open yet, or they're not accepting applications. So I would need to get more information once they decide to post it to further clarify. But other than that, it is pretty limited, especially because it's not, you know, community-wide infrastructure. We're not dealing with a water main improvement or advancing that. It's a very small scale one. Unfortunately, with Penticton, they also had to provide money from themselves or through donations through the community that provided support for the installation of them. So they weren't able to find grants as well. And yes, the Climate Action Reserve and the Green Revolving Fund are both directed at mitigation-based projects, so emission reduction, not adaptation, unfortunately.
Councillor Van Elfen.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Yeah, we had this discussion earlier or in the past when Councillor Traynor brought it up. I think it's a good idea, but I don't think this type of equipment is necessary. I think, you know, as Councillor Carlson had mentioned, I think it, you know, Rotary Beach, Peach Orchard Beach, Memorial Park, maybe some other strategic locations in our downtown core, City Hall. We have all the infrastructures here. It's basically drill a hole through a wall and put a tap in place or a fountain, fill station. And also there's possibility of business owners in our downtown core that may be willing to have a water fill station at their business, you know, providing potable water. But, you know, to go out and buy specific carts or towers, I don't think is necessary. Like we have water at Memorial Park. We have shade at Memorial Park. I think the biggest key would be signage to direct people to where the potable water is. That's my comment. Thank you.
I'm just going to ask a question and then I'll go to you, Councillor Van Elfen, or Councillor Holmes. Do we have water at Memorial Park other than what comes out of the taps in the sink, in the washrooms?
Through the chair, from what I'm understanding, there is a spigot that's somewhere on one of the buildings, I believe. But because it's been damaged or vandalized in some capacity over the years, I don't believe it's regularly turned on. And with that being said, I don't know how accessible it is or where it's located, if it's easily sited within the park. And because of its inconsistent use, I don't know how well people are aware of it. So there's a couple unknowns there.
There used to be a fountain there, but that's been gone for some time. Yeah. Councillor Van Elfen. Councillor Holmes.
Thank you. Reminds me of a story. I'll tell you later. Yeah, I think, it'd be worth budgeting for several of those filler pedestals. I have a question, though, about the fountains. During COVID, all these fountains were turned off because of hygienic concerns. Is that still a concern, or is it okay, we can drink from water fountains now?
Through the chair to Councillor Holmes. I'm not a healthcare provider or professional, but to my knowledge, there is no restrictions on using fountains. I know a lot of places, just personally from visiting, a lot of them do have the kind of bubbler fountain feature closed off to avoid the mouth contact. But I mean, the pedestal ones would be the most usable. I think the only other option would be the dog one, which is low enough for dogs to only use. I would be surprised if people would try to use it, but yeah.
I could think of a few little kids who probably would try. A follow-up, if I may?
Question?
Yeah. So we're building or planning to build a number of year-round washrooms down the lakeshore, Johnson Mountain, downtown. And I'm just wondering if there'd be any opportunity to have a filler station as part of those projects on the outside walls of those new washrooms.
Through the chair to Councillor Holmes, yes. In talking with our plumber, they used to actually work for Peachland, and that's what they did. They just attached it directly to the building. From what he was stating is that it saves a lot of time and money because you already have all the plumbing in the building itself, and so you don't have to connect it through a main somewhere else in the park. So that is definitely an option. It would be kind of like the ones that we see at the airports or in the schools, those types of filler stations. And I don't have the costing for them, but they would be a few thousand, I believe, if I recall correctly, and would be readily accessible just because of how popular they are. So that's definitely an option. And talking with Parks and Rec would be a good idea too.
Graham?
Yeah, and just point of clarity, that the Peach Orchard and Rotary Beach washrooms receiving renovation, one of them will be in all season. The other one will just undergo some renovation. We are worried about the budget on those already because of the inflation. So as Odessa noted, if we want to do something there, we'd have to apply some budget towards that project as well.
Okay. Councillor Barkwell.
I lean towards the comments that Councillor Van Elfen made, that we don't necessarily need fancy, expensive watering towers. We just need to make sure that the fountains and taps that we have are operating properly and that people know where they are. And I would, if there is a location that one of these towers is considered appropriate, well, I would want to know exactly how much it's going to cost, and including the installation and plumbing, and is it going to be year round, and where it would go. And so there's, I'm not willing to give any carte blanche approvals for cooling towers or water towers, but also I'd like to move on to one of the things I think people would really enjoy is.
Just a sec, Councillor Barkle, do you have a question for Odessa?
Well,
If we could get the questions out of the way, then we can get the motion on the floor and then we can have a further discussion.
So in the alternatives, it doesn't say anything about misting stations, which is what I think people would enjoy the most. I guess I'll have to make my own motion.
So with that not being in the, well, at least it's not in the pictures. I know that there is some in the report. Is that a consideration? At least getting a question out of that?
There we go. Through the chair. Yes, they are. They didn't have a picture because they're things that you can buy at Canadian Tire or like typical home hardware stores. So they're nothing as fantastical as the pedestals, but they can be. And that's kind of up to council, where you can provide in the very first motion what kind of infrastructure you would like to include. And it's water filling infrastructure should be invested, but it can also be amended to just say any infrastructure. So that could be a combination of the tents and the misters, if that's something of interest. So yeah, it was more or less the fact that the filling stations were highlighted more predominantly, but it can be. The costing is there. I think it was between $30 and $40, depending on what size and how many feet you would need for the tubing and piping for the water misters.
Thank you. And I just have a question of CAO Stat. I think you were telling us that last year the Works and Infrastructure team did fashion a few misters anyways. Could you kind of confirm or clarify that?
Yeah, we conducted a search for what may have happened to those. We've been unsuccessful. There has been some reorganization of the yards up there, but they were rudimentary. So I think it was essentially a piece of hose with holes put in it and pressurized off a water spigot. So something, we could probably reproduce quite easily for the small amount of dollars that Odessa's highlighting there, or buy something aftermarket, one or the other.
Thank you. Councillor Holmes.
Yes, thank you. So point number 3 in the staff recommendation about developing an engagement plan, what would that entail?
Through the chair to Councillor Holmes. That was specifically towards engaging with the community, not only on the types of infrastructure that they would believe would benefit them in heat waves or extreme heat events, but also the location of them. So if water filling stations or buggies or mister stations with the tent canopies were to be considered, I recommended that mainly because at the end of the day, this is a community need that needs to be addressed by the community. And if they feel that the value of installing infrastructure, especially the cost related to it, would benefit them, then we can get that information directly from the community versus potentially missing out on potential vulnerable populations or locations that we may not consider here around council. So yeah, it would definitely be going out, finding out first, do they want these? Where do they want them if they do want them? And what types of infrastructure would they see benefit them as a community?
Follow up, I mean. Wouldn't that be getting ahead of ourselves a little bit? Perhaps we should maybe do, I mean, the way I see this is that I would like to ask staff to bring something back or to consider it and bring something back so we can consider it for budget. And then, and then if we agree to include it in the budget, and then we could, I wouldn't think that's such a difficult thing to determine where they are. A lot will depend on where the water mains are. If it's just a pedestal, I don't know. I don't know if we need to do it all at the same time, no?
Councillor Traynor.
I'm going to give this a shot. I don't know if it's going to work or not. I think maybe a long-term plan we could do in community engagement, especially this summer if we have more heat domes under our belts, so to speak, and we can learn from them and see how they impact the community. Then I think we could think of maybe a more long-term plan and on different ways that we could help our citizens through those difficult times. But I don't think if we're going to do something for this summer, anticipating that we will have some kind of weather event, I don't think we have a lot of time, and especially because costs keep going up for everything. So I'm wondering, just to kind of simplify this so that we don't spend, a whole lot of time and staff energy on it, would we be able to get a specific list, I guess, of actual water fountains that we have and ones that could be working by this summer? And then could we get, and I'm just, again, throwing this out there, a price for getting 2 pedestals with the dog stations that one would go downtown and one would go in Lower Town, and where those could be, and would they be able to be hooked up relatively easy in a convenient location where there's a water main available. And so then at least we've got 2 areas covered. We know we have something for this summer. And so just to get a final price on that. And then so that, in addition to having an exact list of where our fountains are and which ones are working and which ones can be working. And then we're not making too much of an investment, but we're doing something. So yeah, that's just a suggestion. So I guess, okay, so that's my motion. So again, so do you have that, Kendra? Okay, so yeah, a specific list of which fountains we have, which ones we could get working, and then kind of final costs on purchasing 2, one for Lower Town and one for downtown.
I have a question related to that motion.
Yeah.
Because this might need to go in the motion.
Okay.
Do you have any idea what the availability might be? Because, procurement seems to be a real issue for all kinds of things.
Through the chair. So one quote I got was 4 to 6 weeks. And because the 2 companies, one is from Ontario and the other one is from Quebec, it might vary right now, just time of the year, but I was originally quoted, I believe, in March, 4 to 6 weeks. So.
Okay. CAO stat?
Just to add in here, understanding that there's a timeline there, I think we do have some estimated pricing that Odessa has put together on installed with the version.
Yeah, it's in our
Yeah, the installed pricing is in the report, Odessa. I think
the actual station itself.
we have the actual price estimate with installation, if council's interested, because I'm just putting it out there. If there's general perspective that maybe a couple of these further to the motion are desirable, we could order those so they get the process going. We could come back and figure out where exactly, once we have the other part of the information on where potentially there's decommissioned water fountain or water infrastructure. So I wonder if council would be interested in knowing the installed price from Odessa, or if we just want to come back and entirely on that.
Did you want to speak to the question there?
Yeah, the motion has to be seconded. Yeah.
I know. But I wanted to ask that question because the motion is moot. If it's going to be, 8 months before we can get a water station, then we have to look at something different. But I got an answer to my question. Did you want to respond to what Graham has said, that we'd like to have the?
It's a bit of a. Yeah, sure.
Yeah.
It would be useful information for the motion. I'd like to know.
Okay. And you do have that readily available? Okay, great. Councillor Van Alphen. Okay, so I'll second the motion. And now we've got it on the floor. And now we can hear further from you. Thank you.
Thank you. So through the chair, so for the cheapest model type, the single bottle refill station with installation and PST is $6,867. Now this doesn't include shipping because it varies between how many you pick up and the type of model, so I'm not including that in there. With the refill station, a small little fountain, and the doggy bowl, for this particular model that's on the lower end of cost. It is $9,451 and 65 cents. And a next tier one, which is a refill with a small fountain, is $8,221 and change. So the installation, I did it on the lower end. This is assuming that the pedestals are installed close by to a water main and that there is very limited materials and time needed by staff. The higher end of that is 6,000. So there is a bit of a range. And so ideally, strategically placing these would be in our best interest from a cost perspective.
Sorry, did you say 6,000 just for the installation, high end? Down to what?
Through the chair, so it would be between 4,000 and 6,000.
Thank you. Councillor Van Alphen.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. That's kind of why I'm going back to the building mounted type system where the infrastructure already exists. Like our washrooms at Memorial Park have water. So it's basically the plumber punches a hole through the wall, extends the pipe to a wall mounted apparatus. Purchasing pedestals and placing them wherever is no different than having one on the side of City Hall, Memorial Park, or one down at the washroom at Rotary Beach, or one over at Giants Head Park. It doesn't have to be a single installed pedestal sitting somewhere. It can be on an existing building using existing water lines, which would, I think, would help bring the cost down. But last time I checked, I'm not a plumber. So could we have that conversation with our plumbing department and come up with the best case scenario? We're still getting the same product, basically. You know, you'll have the ability to fill a water bottle without putting your lips on a fountain, possibly. Same idea. We just don't have to purchase this infrastructure. We can do a made in Summerland concept. We have the talent at our public works yard to do so, I think. Thank you.
I have a question for you, Odessa, or maybe Graham knows the answer to this one. With the year-round washrooms that are being put in at Peach Orchard, I think it is, right? I'm wondering if that's a spot, as Graham is saying. But my question is, the spray park down at Peach Orchard Beach, where does that water come from? Is it just drawn from the lake and put back into the lake? Or is it's fresh potable water?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I'm more familiar with the Alberta side and as it comes to these spray parks, splash parks, but they're usually treated drinking water to avoid contamination and pathology.
Good, that's kind of what I thought, but I wanted to make sure. So I'm wondering if it would be relatively easy, because the water is already going to that infrastructure, to have some kind of something down there, whether it's a fountain on the washroom wall, or if it's a fountain that is out more in the spray park, towards the spray park area, or under Spirit Square, the covering. I'm not sure. Seems to me that infrastructure is virtually in place. It would just be an installation cost. Councillor Holmes.
So according to the map on the presentation here, the water mains don't go to Peach Orchard Park. They go as far as Rotary and stop at Rotary Beach. So I don't know, I'm not looking at our GS, just on the presentation we have here from Odessa. So I don't know where that water comes from. Well, there's no water main. GIS is a perfect.
Okay, so other discussion on this? Councillor Traynor.
Yeah, $6,000 does seem like a lot of money to install a pedestal on top of a existing water pipe, but I guess that's what it costs. So yeah, I mean, I don't want this to be a huge project. I just was honestly thinking about people in the summer during these heat domes. How can we help them out? And you know, it's too bad that everything is so expensive. But you know, maybe like I said, if we could get some more information about the existing fountains and possibly a little bit more information about like what Councillor Van Alphen said about places that we could install wall-mounted water filling stations at existing infrastructure, then hopefully that could help us save some money and then also accomplish what we want to do, which is provide drinking water for people during these heat domes.
Councillor Van Alphen?
No, I want to say thank you to Councillor Trainer. I think it's important. I really do. Like, I just think there's a made in Summerland solution that could be more affordable to the taxpayers. But I have, and I mentioned it years ago to a previous council, that I witnessed people filling water bottles off of irrigation lines that are used to fill their pesticide tanks. So I mean, I think it's a valuable asset for our community, but I just think, I don't know, like I'm a tradesperson by trade. That's what I do. I'm not a plumber, but put it on a wall, hook up a pipe and you're good to go. That's my theory, but thank you for bringing it forward.
I have a question and I don't know where it would go. Maybe I don't know where it would go. There is, and I know it's a business, but there is a water refill station at just in behind Peach Orchard, just in behind the Rosedale. Yeah, in between, there is a H2O station or something. I know that that's a business, but I wonder if that might be a possibility as well, even if there is, I'm not even sure how it works because I've never used one, but if there would be a way of approaching the business as in terms of a community contribution, whether it be for like a portion of the water being provided at a wholesale rate or free maybe even, or just a portion of the water. I'm just kind of thinking around this because it was pretty awful here last year with 45 degrees, especially for people that don't have air conditioning. And I'm one of those. And seeing my dog suffer for that, through that as well. And we have a place that we can live in, and we don't have any mobility challenges. I just can't imagine how horrific this would have been for other people in Summerland. We hear that it was over 600 people, I think, that passed away just because of this heat dome. I think that whatever we can do within reason, and I totally get what you're saying, Councillor Van Alphen, in finding a way that works best for Summerland and the taxpayers of Summerland, which includes all of us. I think that's a great way to go. Councillor Barkwell.
I'm looking at these towers here and I'm thinking, well, maybe it'd be a cool thing down at Rotary or Peach Orchard Beach. And then I'm thinking, well, do I like them or are they ugly? And are they just going to get vandalized? And wouldn't the fountain idea be much more attractive and durable and cheaper? So, I think we want to see some specific proposals for some specific locations, and then with maybe some alternatives, and then take it from there. We don't. And the other thing I'd add is that I just read today that there's supposed to be a La Nina summer and it'll be relatively cool and we're not facing any imminent heat domes at this time. So we got some time to work on it.
You're right. Doesn't mean very much. We can always hope. Yes.
So with my motion, I think in my mind, it still stands because if we can still just get a cost for install, I think in the motion I had 2 pedestals, just so that we know like a final price on one for downtown. Once you actually, and pick a downtown location that's easiest and cheapest to install, like wherever the infrastructure is. And then at least when we get a report back, we'll have that final information. So we're not just kind of guessing and we can vote yes or no on that. And then also the other part of that motion had a list of the locations and then prices if we were to put bottle station or fill things there or fountains. So just to clarify, I'm still going to vote in favor of the motion because I think it still covers what I originally intended.
Could I have you read the motion again, please, Kendra, and then we will vote on it.
That staff be directed to report back on the status of existing water fountains within the community and the final price, including installation costs, for 2 water bottle filler pedestals with dog stations to be placed in the downtown and lower town area.
Okay. That's what I seconded. I'll call the question. All in favor? Opposed? Councillor Van Elfen is opposed, so that carries. Thank you, Councillor Traynor. Thank you, Odessa. And now we are well past our break time, so we're going to take a break until how about 3:25? 7.5, election and assent voting bylaw amendment bylaw number 2022-020 for Kendra Kinsley.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. So prior to the general local election, it is recommended that the election bylaw be reviewed to ensure that the provisions align with the Local Government Act and Election BC regulations and processes and any other relevant statutes. Staff had reviewed the bylaw and proposed the following amendments. So the first amendment would be the use of the provincial voters list. Previously, voters would register at the time of voting, and by using the provincial voters list, those electors who are registered and are not required to provide proof of identity or residency, which can reduce the processing time, lineups, and congestion at the voting opportunity. Electors can go online to Elections BC to register to vote and update their personal information. This will be communicated well in advance to residents, and residents' names who do not appear on the provincial voters list will still be able to register to vote at the voting opportunity. Candidates are also eligible to get a copy of the provincial voters list to be used for campaigning purposes. The second amendment would be updating the access to nomination documents. Nomination documents must be available for public inspection at the local government office during regular business hours from the time the documents are received until 30 days after the official election results are declared. A local government can adopt a bylaw to provide public access to nomination documents in any manner considered appropriate, including by posting on the internet or other electronic means. The proposed amendment will authorize the chief election officer to post the nomination documents on the website to provide an up-to-date information of those that are running. A photo and bio of the candidate may be provided to be uploaded with the documents. And the third proposed amendment is an amendment to Section 5, Additional General Voting Opportunities. So this amendment would provide the chief election officer with the discretion to establish a second location on general voting day. Due to the district's aging voting machines and the potential for COVID-19 to affect staffing levels, one location is being recommended for the 2022 general local election to ensure adequate resources and staffing are available. So this would be Summerland Secondary School. In addition, there will be a minimum of 2 advanced voting days and 2 special voting opportunities offered prior to the general voting day. The bylaw currently gives the chief election officer the authority to designate those, so we're still looking at maybe if there should be a third, and that will be determined at a later date. And for further council consideration, although not included in the proposed amendments, but included in an option for council, is the provision of mail ballot voting. So the province of BC has recently amended the Local Government Act for increased mail ballot voting opportunities. Previously, only persons with a physical disability, illness, or injury that affected their ability to vote at a polling station, or persons who were expected to be absent from the district at the time of voting were permitted to vote by mail. The province has now changed that requirement, and mail ballot voting is available to anyone who wishes to vote by mail. So moving forward with mail ballot voting opens up additional opportunities for residents to vote, which would be beneficial. However, offering mail ballot voting also presents some challenges. And these challenges include there is a difficulty in determining the precise date as to when the mail ballot packages will be ready, as it is dependent on when the ballots are received from the printer. Names on the ballots cannot be finalized until Saturday, September 17th, so a week after the close of the nomination period. Once the names and the ballots are finalized, the list will then be forwarded to the printers to print the ballots. This leads into a limited turnaround time once the ballot is finalized and printed and mail ballot packages are created and ready to be shipped out or picked up. It is anticipated that an additional 5 days at minimum will be required by Canada Post for the mail ballot package to reach the elector. Once the elector has received the ballot, they will be required to complete the mail ballot and return to the chief election officer either by mail or by dropping off at Municipal Hall or another designated drop-off location, which also leads to a challenge with the turnaround time for mail ballots to be mailed back to the district prior to the deadline to receive mail ballots, either by mail, but there is also the ability for those to drop off at Municipal Hall or another designated drop-off location. And the last challenge is the cost associated with mail ballot voting. So it was recommended that you look at 30% of your eligible voters and base your mail ballot numbers off of that. So that would be about approximately 2,000 voters. And if we were to move forward, it would be just above $15,000. So the costs associated with mail ballot voting are largely due to the ballot size and the envelope size. So for one mail ballot package, you need 4 envelopes. You need the package envelope, you need the secrecy envelope, the certification envelope, and the return package. The ballot at a minimum right now is an 8.5 by 11, and until I see the actual names on the ballots, I can't determine if it can be folded because the folds can't go, it can't be folded in any of the little bubbles that a voter would fill in. So we'd have to base it just off of that size. And due to the fact that the minimum size envelope would be, I think it's 9 by 12, Canada Post would actually consider this an oversized package. So not yet a parcel, but larger than just a regular envelope. So the postage for mailing out mail ballot packages would be $3.19 per package. And that's just to mail back, and the cost to return the envelopes, which depending on how heavy it is, and we know that the package going out to the elector would be over 100 grams, but it still is kind of up in the air on whether the one being returned would be under 100 grams. The return envelope would need to be stamped as well, and that would either be at $1.94 or it would also be at $3.19. So using those calculations, and if the cost to return the mail ballot package is over 100 grams, the total cost for mail ballots would be $15,480. And it's hard to say. We may not have 2,000 residents voting by mail, or we may have a large uptake. We did reach out to Elections BC, and they said this area did have a rather large turnout for mail ballot voting for the last provincial election. So I would anticipate that we could potentially see that here as well. And with that, I am happy to take any questions.
Not sure who had their hand up first, but I'll go to Councillor Carlson and then Councillor Van Elfen.
Thank you. Lots of information. I'm just wondering how this would impact the actual results and the timing of the results. Would it all be on election day or would it be beyond that?
So it would be on election day. So there's quite the process on receiving mail ballots, but essentially they would get their own ballot box, and at the time of counting, so after 8 p.m. on general election day, you would open up the secrecy envelopes and file them through the tabulators as well.
Councillor Van Elfen?
Thank you. Locations for the advanced polls. Did you say locations?
Through the chair, we have not yet determined the locations for the advanced polls. So previously they were done in Municipal Hall. Both the Deputy Chief Election Officer and I have been talking on whether or not we want to hold them again in Municipal Hall or whether we want to look at a different location such as the Arena Banquet Room, but it has not yet been decided.
Thank you.
Councillor Holmes?
Thank you. You have a few questions about mail ballots, if I may. Are we required to provide mail ballots by law? It's up to us.
It's up to us, and it would be set by bylaw if we were.
Okay, thank you. And so the last provincial election, I believe, maybe federal, I think provincial, the way the mail ballots work, I believe, is they were printed before the candidates, all the candidates were known, and you wrote in the name of the candidate, and that's because I remember doing that myself, and so I'm just wondering if that's an option to.
So through the chair, no, because our voting machine wouldn't be able to read that ballot, so it has to be on the format that our voting machines can read.
Okay, and one other, if I may. So is there any evidence, either from the provincial election or anywhere else, that mail-in ballots increase the turnout percentage? I mean, those 2,000 people we expect, to turn in mail ballots. Do we know, would those same people vote in person if that was their only choice? I guess the question is, what is the purpose of us having mail-in ballots?
So that's a good question, and I don't know the full answer to that. I think the purpose of mail ballot voting is in the intention with the province of amending the Local Government Act, was just to make voting more accessible to those that previously maybe just were heading out of town, they were snowbirds, or especially with the COVID pandemic, those that maybe didn't feel comfortable going into a space. So I think the purpose of it was to increase access to voting, but I don't know the answer on whether or not that has actually, well, in a general or a municipal election, it hasn't been the case. This is the first year that the expanded opportunity has been allowed, but I don't know the answer in relation to the provincial election.
Oh, you have another question?
One more, if I
Okay.
may follow up. So I think one of the great things about the last provincial election, how it was run, and this was because of COVID, was you could go in to vote into a BC elections office and at any time during opening hours and cast your ballot. And that was incredibly convenient. And I don't know if we have the possibility of doing that here or not. Or and if, so that's one question. And secondly, what's the cost of having more advanced polling dates vis-a-vis cost of having mail-in ballots?
I have, so through the chair, so through our elections training, we wouldn't be able to just have anyone come in at any time to vote. We would have to set up an actual voting opportunity. However, if you were to offer mail ballot voting, there has been cases where certain municipalities have set up a desk and they've picked up their package. So it wasn't actually mailed. They've just picked it up and then they filled it out and then they put it in all its envelopes and then they actually gave it back and it went into its mail ballot box. So that is one option that could be provided through mail ballot voting. The cost versus mail ballot voting and offering an additional advanced voting day. So I believe the cost for staffing for 2 advanced voting days, special voting opportunities, and 1 voting location is actually roughly the same as offering mail ballot voting. So we would probably have to increase the budget, but we could look at staffing. I could come back with costs for staffing to set up an additional advanced voting day.
Okay, I think you may have answered one of the questions that I had. I was trying to find in here, I thought that I read in the RFD the number of voters that we had last year, but I guess my question is, is it about 2,000?
I believe the last general election had just over, I think it was 4,099. And then prior to that, it was 4,446.
So 5,000 people. If we decide to go with the mail-in ballots, do we have to have 5,000 mail-in ballots printed?
We don't so thank you, Madam Mayor. So we don't have to. It is very hard to say how many people, like we could budget for 2,000 people. We could have 10 people pick it up. So it's very hard to say, and we won't know. So you register in advance to mail ballot vote. So at the time of the notice of the election, when that is put out in the paper, notice of the election or the one previous, one of the notices right around the September mark, that's when you would also put out your notice to register for mail ballot voting. So we wouldn't know until that date roughly even how many people were thinking about this.
Okay, and this second question you have answered already, and that was, can we ask people to pick up their ballot? So that's a possibility. We can do that. And we can also encourage people to drop off their ballot. Like, if you're going to vote, make sure your vote counts. Like, get it there on time. Okay, and I can see how that wouldn't work for people that are out of town or people that vote here, but want to have a mail-in ballot anyways. But that would reduce the number of potential losses for the day count, right? Okay. Thank you. So, are there any other questions for Kendra? Councillor Traynor.
I guess something to consider as well. I just checked the voter turnout for Summerland for the municipal election in 2018. And I think if I'm reading this right, it was 45.6% of eligible voters. So I think we should keep that in mind too, that municipal elections usually have the lowest voter turnout compared to provincial or federal. So 2,000, what was that number that you gave us again, the 2,000? Is that the number of, that's 30% of eligible voters?
Yeah, so 2,000 was just a number we kind of picked.
Oh, you did? Okay.
It's 30% because we have roughly almost 9. I'm really terrible at math. We have almost about 9,000 eligible
Right.
voters within
Okay.
the district. I actually think with the AAP it was 9,866 was the last provincial election. So it was about 30% of that number, which was that's been the recommendation that, you know, Elections BC, the province, the ministry has said for us to base our mail ballot voting numbers on.
Okay.
So we could reduce the amount. We could say, okay, maybe we only budget for 1,500 mail ballot packages, which would significantly reduce the amount. But it is just hard to say. Who knows?
Yeah.
Maybe we get 1,500 people. I don't know. We probably wouldn't, but it would be pretty terrible in the event that we did and we didn't have enough.
So we had 4,100 people vote last time. So I just think that's something to consider before, before we decide to go to mail voting, whether we want to spend that kind of money when we're getting typical voter turnout of, it looks like it's between 45 and like 52% in general.
No, that was 2018. And Banks Crescent. So the recommendation or the resolution here is to receive it for first, second, and third reading, but we don't even know what it is that we're voting on. So we need to have more discussion on what it is that. Go ahead.
Sorry, I can just clarify the motion. So the motion is for the first 3 amendments. That's the provincial voter registration, the access to nomination documents, and the housekeeping amendments. And then if you just scroll to the bottom of the RFD, should council choose to want to include mail ballot voting, I did include wording for a resolution if council wanted to go the way of mail ballot voting. I was a bit unclear on my part. I apologize.
Yeah, sorry, I see that now. Councillor Carlson.
I don't think I missed it. I think it's a question. Are other communities going through the same process, or have they already agreed? Like, do we know if communities are going to allow mail-in voting?
So just off the top of my head, I think this is a lot of communities are going this way. Peachland, Oliver, and Penticton offer mail ballot voting, just the ones that I can recall quite quickly. So it is common in the area.
And the 15,000 is based on 2,000 mail-ins? Yeah, so that'd be first and second? Yeah?
So I will move the motion that is here on our agenda that the election and dissent voting amendment bylaw number 2022-020 receive first, second, and third reading.
Seconder, Councillor Holmes. So that is including the mail-in ballots? It isn't.
That's another.
Oh, that's the housekeeping amendments. Yes, thank you. Thank you very much. Councillor Van Elfen.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I can support that motion, but I cannot support $15,000 for mail-in ballots. Even though I did bring it up originally.
Any further discussion? Councillor Holmes.
Yeah, just in regard to the mail-in ballots, you know, I'm struggling with this because I don't even know if we're the right people to make this decision. But you know, I'm all for doing whatever we can to get people out to vote. You know, that's, I think, that should be the #1 goal. What I don't know is, do mail-in ballots get more people to vote or not? If somebody could tell me categorically, yeah, absolutely. If you have mail-in ballots, your voter percentage is going to be increased 2 or 3%, then I think it'd be worth it. But without having that information, I think it's a lot of money, you know, and I think there is some obligation on the voter to make a bit of an effort to vote. And if it's just for avoiding having to go out on to cast a ballot, which they would do anyway, then I don't, you know, I don't know. I don't know if it's worth it. So I just wish I had more information. I'd really like to. I think we need to think about is why are we having mail-in ballots? It made perfect sense in the middle of the pandemic when it was difficult to do things in person. But now, if we're anticipating it shouldn't be difficult to get out and do it in person, then I think we should be encouraging the people to get out and vote in person. So, thanks.
It's hard to provide that data when it's never been done in a local election, right? Yeah, it's kind of a trial and error. Councillor Traynor and then Councillor Van Elfen.
So the thing with mail-in ballots is that you still have to request one, right? So I don't necessarily think you're going to get a bunch more. If they went out to everybody and then you had the choice to vote from home or to go in, then I think you might see an uptake. But the person still has to phone in and get it, which means that they still have to have a desire to want to vote, right? So I don't see how it would increase drastically the number of people voting, because you still got to take that step to phone and get your ballot. That's just a thought, but it would be interesting to know that data.
Councillor Van Elfen.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Question through to our corporate officer. When is the soonest advance poll prior to election day?
It's 10 days prior, so I believe that's October 5th. Wednesday, October 5th would be our first required advanced voting. And if we were to follow a similar suit in 2018, it would have been that Wednesday, Thursday. I believe it was a Wednesday, Thursday, the same prior.
Thank you.
Okay, if there's no further discussion, then I'll call the question. I just want to make sure that I have it clear. By voting in favor of this, we are saying that we will not look at mail-in ballots. Okay, thank you. No, that if we just do first and second reading, then we can do the mail-in ballots as a follow-up in the next, yeah. So as it stands now, what's on the floor is not to include mail-in ballots. Okay. All right, all in favor? Opposed? I'm opposed. All right. And hate to do this, but can we defer the last item to the evening meeting so we can get our close done?
Which last item?
Oh, sorry, am I missing? Oh, geez, am I missing something already? 7 point. Oh, no, 7.6, sorry. That's the next long one. So the housing on ag land review, because we only have 12 minutes and we haven't even started closed. And then we'll have the opportunity to spend more time on it this evening. Okay. So do you need a motion for that, to defer? Okay, I'll make the motion to defer, seconded by Councillor Van Elfen. Any discussion? All in favor? Okay. Thank you, everyone. I'm sorry. I did give you a little heads up warning, but I'm still sorry. So we'll just zip forward to what's shown as item 8 or 8.1, the tax rate bylaw number 2022-016, and it's just for adoption. Does anyone have any questions of Kendra? Could someone make that motion, please, for adoption? Councillor Holmes, seconded by Councillor Van Alphen. All in favor? Great, thank you. And if someone could make, oh, is there anybody waiting to talk to us? Okay. Resolution to close the meeting to the public, Councillor Van Alphen and Holmes, all in favor?